Alrighty, and we're on. So I'm here with Natalie Dumer.
Hello, Johnny. Nice to be here.
I'm going to turn my volume down a little bit. Is your volume okay? Is it too loud?
That's all right.
Okay, cool. So how Nat and I met, so I guess, in the interest of disclosure, we've sort of crossed paths as we're on this political journey.
Yes, a very fascinating political journey, totally outside of my personal comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people that I've met through this journey has been interesting because, I feel like most people had never really contemplated going down this pathway, and it was just through circumstances out of their control or circumstances that have impacted them that have decided, okay, perhaps I need to do something about this. Is that fair to say?
I think that's absolutely correct. I think I thought my whole life I would have been a dentist.
Yep.
I did not think for a second that I would turn around and change career paths or do something so left field for me.
Yep. It's funny. I actually had we got a little chat in WhatsApp with my high school mates, and so when I actually told them that, hey, I'm going to be involved in the next federal election, I actually had a couple of my mates message me and say, "Are you okay?" Like, that was the first response, and it was really nice. Like, it was just like, and I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, right? And so then a couple of them said, "Oh, I've got questions. I'll message you later." And they messaged me, and then they just wanted to make sure that I had really thought things through, and wanted to make sure that mentally I was okay.
Isn't that funny? I had a different journey. I didn't go looking for this at all.
Yep.
At all. It kind of found me. So I was more on the journey of the medical pathways and how to help people, and then kind of landed talking to Craig Kelly's office, and someone there said, you should join and you should, go down this pathway and apply. And I thought about it, and it ended up coming from a fortune cookie the following day, which is absolutely ludicrous, I know. But one of my nurses gave me a fortune cookie and said, this was on the very, very next day, that I'd meet somebody who would change my career. And I thought, well, is the universe trying to tell me something?
Yeah.
Maybe I should.
Yeah.
So I applied.
All right. Well, let's wind it all back so that people can understand more about, we're not really here to talk about political things today. We're here more to just talk about, have a conversation together and try and understand, where each other's come from and in terms of the background and things like that. So for you, were you born here or were you born overseas?
No, I was born in the former USSR. So I'm actually from Ukraine, where all the trouble is.
Oh, wow.
So my hometown is Odessa. It's on the Black Sea.
Yep.
I was 6 years old when my parents decided to get me out of there. Well, they decided when I was 3, but unfortunately it was very difficult to get out of a socialist country.
Yep.
You had to ask permission. Being from a Jewish background, they didn't want us. So it was easier to get out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My grandparents, my dad's parents, didn't want us to go, so they kept hiding invitations because you had to get an invitation from Australia.
Okay.
We had relatives here to get out of there. So it was 3 years worth of invitations, and my parents were cleaning my grandparents' house and found the invitations in the linen cupboard.
Oh, so your grandfather was hiding?
They were hiding it. They didn't want us to go. I was the only grandchild. My dad's got a brother, but, you've got family that just doesn't want to let you go.
Yep.
But I also have a mother who's incredibly tough. She's a tough lady, and she decided, and that's what she was going to do, and there was nothing that was going to stop her.
Yep.
So we left. I was 6 years old. Yeah.
Wow. So what can you remember of growing up in Odessa? Like, I guess, before the age of 6, you probably have a few memories.
I do. I remember our revolting green wallpaper. I know that sounds really weird. We lived in 2 rooms. So it wasn't 2 bedrooms. It was 2 rooms.
So 2 rooms of like an apartment? Or?
An apartment.
Yep.
So you had, the bedroom was me, my parents, and the other room was my grandmother. And when my grandfather was alive, it was him as well. So we had a shared bathroom with 7 families.
Oh, wow.
And a shared kitchen with 7 families. So if someone ever fell asleep in the bathroom, you were pretty screwed.
Wow. So I guess to try and help people visualize this, like, so you're in 2 rooms of an apartment. How big is that apartment? Like, how many rooms are there in that apartment? 2.
It's tiny.
It's
you're in a communal apartment where each family had 2 rooms.
Yeah.
So it would have been probably in the Tsarist time, it would have been an apartment of a particular dignitary or royal or whatever it was, or I don't really know.
Yep.
And it was divided.
Yep.
So communal apartments meant that the families that lived in that particular apartment. There was a corridor dividing these apartments.
Yeah, okay.
They all shared the bathroom and they all shared the kitchen.
Yep.
So it was quite interesting to live in a place like that.
Do you have any memories of like having to rush, through the bathroom or like, to try and...
No, I actually don't. I have more memories. My other grandparents had what's called the dacha, which was like a summer house.
Okay.
I do remember they had an outhouse toilet.
Yep.
And it scared me to death. That was frightening. There was like a little light bulb that didn't always work and it was a hole in the ground and it was horrendous. And my kindergarten also had a hole in the ground as a toilet. That was also frightening. The memories are there. Yeah. I remember more when we crossed the border. That was when my real memories started.
Okay. So your parents decided, when you were about 3 that they wanted to get out. So then how did they decide on Australia?
We had relatives here. So we had my grandfather's cousin came to Sydney through Shanghai, through China. They migrated a very long time ago. I think it was early 1900s.
Wow.
So that whole family was in Sydney and occasionally they'd come visit us in Odessa. So my mum actually knew that all the propaganda in the former USSR about the West was completely incorrect because they had relatives visiting them. Yep. But of course that had to be discussed, behind closed doors because it just, wasn't something you discussed unless you wanted to disappear in the middle of the night.
Yep.
We had relatives here who were sending us the invitations.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then so to get a visa, like how did your...
You had to go through, it was like a refugee visa. So you went through a Jewish community called, I think it was called HIAS or something like that. I don't remember what that stood for. And it was American Jews who paid for us to stay in Italy. So we were in Italy for about 6 or 7 months, I believe. So I didn't go to school. I thought it was the best thing ever. I didn't go anywhere. So I spent the majority of that time with my mum going from art gallery to art gallery. So I became quite passionate about art.
Okay. So, let's sort of unpack that a little bit. So you get to 6 and then finally your mum says, okay, we found these invitations, we're going. So,
well, they didn't tell me that because I would have told the whole world I had the biggest mouth in the world.
Oh, wow.
And it was a real secret. They told me we were going to Moscow, not that I ever questioned when we ended up in Italy. Never questioned it.
Okay. So they said to you, okay, Nat, my dear, we're going to go to Moscow.
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, fantastic. And
Fabulous.
Then so what was the journey like? What do you remember of it?
Okay, so the border I remember vividly. I think it was traumatic for me. It was incredibly traumatic. What happened was some people got strip searched, so I guess we were lucky we didn't get that. We had lots of things to bribe guards with to let us alone and leave us alone. But I was standing on my own and I do remember that my parents were off to the side and so was my grandmother. And a guard came up to me and told me to get my earrings out of my ears. Now, I had these little gold earrings with jade in them that would cost something like 35 rubles, like pathetic money.
Yep.
So they took my earrings off me. And I think I was traumatized enough by watching my dolls, which had their heads pulled off and being put through an x-ray machine.
To check if there's anything inside.
Yeah,
yep.
So I started screaming, like literally screaming, hysterical screaming. The head guard came up and said, why is this kid screaming? And they said, we took her earrings off her ears. And he said, just give them back. He wanted me to shut up. That's all he wanted.
Yeah.
So they did, but luckily for my parents, not only did they give back my earrings, they gave back my parents' wedding bands, which were heavy gold, and my dad's gold watch. Wow. So how good is it that you have a hysterical child occasionally?
And so you mentioned before that in being of Jewish background in the Ukraine, it's like they didn't really want you there.
No, well, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. So in the USSR, it wasn't your religion that was Jewish, that was your nationality on your passport, which was really, really bizarre because it's not. It's a religion.
Yep.
And going back to the USSR, my mum's surname, her maiden name was Feldman.
Okay.
And she was a really good pianist and she wanted to go to the Conservatorium of Music. But with a surname like Feldman, it's a very difficult task. So you find people to bribe like you did in USSR for everything, which is why they're so corrupt. And my grandfather ended up in jail over it.
Wow. What, to try and bribe to get in?
To get in, and she was an amazing pianist, but it's anything to do with the Jewry is very difficult. My uncle, who's my mother's brother, he was an incredibly smart man. He had a photographic memory, ended up in the space program. And again, with a name like Feldman, it was very, very difficult to do, and he did it. He achieved it ultimately. But when we left, we couldn't mention his name. We couldn't even ask about him in case he had problems. because of the
because you guys
KGB.
have left.
Yeah, because we were foreigners. That's it. We were persona non grata, basically.
Yeah.
As soon as you leave the border, that's it. You give up your citizenship.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after you get across the border, where did you guys stay? Where did you go?
We went through, we were in Vienna, I think for about 3 or 4 days. We were meant to be in Vienna for one, but I ended up in hospital. That was my first experience in hospital without my mother.
What happened? How did you end up in hospital?
I ended up with a really high fever, and my mum was really worried about me because I don't know exactly what was wrong with me, but I ended up overnight in hospital, and the nurses there were really, really lovely, but they were all speaking German.
Yeah.
So for a Russian-speaking kid, it was really traumatic. I cried all night. My mum wasn't allowed to stay with me, but that was, again, a little bit of a trauma. Then we ended up going to Italy. So we stayed in Ostia, which is very close to Rome, for about 7 months. And that was all at the expense of the American Jews. It was a society that was getting people, Russian people, Ukrainian people, Latvian, Lithuanians, all out of there for a better life.
Wow. Okay. So then, so I guess from the moment you guys left your apartment or your 2 rooms in Odessa to getting to Italy, how long was that journey in total?
Well, it would have been about 3 days, 3-4 days.
Okay.
Yeah. And we had somebody who actually did look after us and tell us what to do, where to go. Like it was really organised. It was guided. It was organised. And Italy was great. My dad ended up working for this organisation that helped the Jews because he could speak English.
Okay.
So he could translate. So it was quite convenient. And I've just got great memories of Italy.
Yep.
Absolutely beautiful memories. I came back there as an adult and I could actually remember little bits and pieces.
Really?
Like around the corner I'd go, oh yeah, I know there's a statue there.
Yep.
Been here before. It's ingrained in your memory.
Yep. So from a language speaking perspective, like did you start to pick up Italian as well while you were there, or?
I don't think I picked up a lot.
Okay. Because
we sort of hung around all the Russian speakers, and there was an area. It was a post office, and it's funny because I belong to this group that actually has they reminisce about this. There was a post office where all the Russian speaking people met.
Yep.
It doesn't matter where you were from, but you all spoke Russian when you were from the former USSR, and that's what they did. They communicated with each other and didn't integrate a lot with the Italians, although the Italians are amazing people. They really they helped us a lot. I've got a really good memory of when we first came to Rome, we had to meet somebody to let us into an apartment. And it was boiling hot. It was just one of the hottest days, and we were standing there with all our luggage. There was no one around. And these women just literally brought us food, water, like fed us until we were sick. Really and truly, just amazing people.
Yep.
Couldn't speak a word of Russian. We couldn't speak a word of Italian, but they're such lovely people.
They just welcomed you with open arms.
Yeah, open arms, totally.
Yep.
Really lovely people.
Wow. So then so you mentioned there's obviously, some really fond memories of Italy in that 7 months that you were there. Like what were some of those things? So you mentioned the art galleries.
Oh, yeah, there was art galleries. I had a really good friend who now lives in Melbourne. We did everything together because we were a similar age. So, yeah, we were just literally mucking around. And it was interesting. We didn't have the money to eat chocolate or buy anything because we're just really poor. And there was a lovely chocolate shop next to us, and we just took it and just looked at the guy, and he just said, take it, go. Like,
wow.
Little
nice.
things like that. Definitely a lot of churches. We went to a lot of churches, not because from a religious perspective, but the artwork and the frescoes. And, Italy's just incredible when it comes to all the arts.
Yeah.
And my mum made sure I had a great appreciation of that,
yeah,
which I still do.
Yeah. And, for your mum to have been a pianist, so obviously, she would have grown up playing piano and from that perspective, did she try and instill any of that in you? Like, I guess obviously
she tried.
Would you have had a piano? Or
we had a piano. They did send a piano right across. She tried, but I think my mother does the Russian school of teaching. So if you do something wrong, she'll wax you over the hands. The Eastern Bloc, they did things like that. And she had a really thick wedding band. I think she hit me once a little bit too hard, and that was it for me. I said, nope, not doing it. I don't want to do it. It's not for me.
Yeah. And so in that and the reason why I bring this up is because, I had it with my daughter the other day, and so we were just doing some reading, right? And so, she's in kindy, so she got to the point where she's like, I don't want to do it anymore. And then I'm like, Cadence, we've already read this book before. I'm going to sit here and wait for you until you're ready, whenever you're ready, and you're going to read this book. And we're not going to do anything else until you read this book. And it only took probably about 10 minutes, and then she was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And she read the book from start to finish, and so she could do it. But like and the reason why I'm picking up on that is because sometimes I just wonder, you know, like Ange and I had a discussion after, and she was like, you know, you say that you don't want to yell at her, but then it's like sometimes you yell, right? And it's like, because I said to her, I'm going to talk to you quite calmly first, and, you know, this is what I want you to do. But if you don't sit on your chair and you don't listen, then Daddy has to use his big voice. Do you want Daddy to use his big voice? And then she's like, no. But then if she goes and mucks around, I have to use the big voice, right? And so, you know, I always wonder whether it's like, you know, did I do the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? You know, to almost like force your child to do it. But sometimes I feel like they need to be pushed a little.
They do. Look, I pushed my daughter quite a bit. My daughter is almost 17. I do push her. I don't mollycoddle her at all. I kind of thought I want her to be a tough kid growing up, because unfortunately the world is not always a kind place, and I want her to be able to, you know, experience the world and be able to fight whatever battle she wants with, you know, being fully equipped. Would I push her doing piano? No, because I think with me how it happened was my mother. I think she just had no idea how to, you know, use her big voice or little voice. She just whacked me. So it was, you know, a little bit different.
Straight to the stick.
It was, she has no recollection of this, by the way.
Your mum?
Zero.
Really?
I have full recollection of this. She will swear black and blue that it never happened.
Yeah, wow.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah, it's like you focus on different things.
Yeah. Whereas that was really vivid in my memory, because that's the exact reason why I said, well, why do I want to do this? I don't love piano. I've never loved playing the piano.
Yeah.
So why would I want to do that? So yeah, I quit. But my daughter became a dancer. Did I push her? No, I didn't have to. And it's funny, there's a lot of musicality in my family all the way on my mum's side anyway. So I had my mum's great uncle was David Oyster, who was one of the top violinists in the world, and he was travelling the world from the USSR, which nobody did back then because you couldn't get out. Then mum was a pianist, and then my daughter became an incredible dancer, but unfortunately has a slip disc, so that's the end of that at 16.
Wow. Did that happen from dancing? Or?
From dancing, yeah.
A bad fall or something?
No, she just used to get a lot of height with jump splits and landed badly.
Yeah, okay.
And that was it. So, but from a creativity perspective, it's all there, and I think that's kudos to her that, you know, you're right-brained and you can create such things that us left-brain people can't do.
All right.
I'm partially jealous.
So after the 7 months in Italy, where was it to from there?
Straight to Sydney.
Oh, wow.
So we came to Sydney. We had our relatives pick us up. They lived in actually Wentworth electorate, which was Dover Heights and Vaucluse, I believe.
Yep.
My mum was in shock. She thought we came to a village. That's what she thought of Sydney, which was really funny because it wasn't. But because she came from high rises and these apartment blocks, which were massive, she thought, my God, what is this? It's like a country town.
Yep.
And she was very unhappy for quite a few years until my dad went to America, because we had a lot of friends that migrated from USSR to the States.
Yep.
And he came back and said, no, Australia's so much better. We've got a really good nation.
Yep.
We've made the right choice. But yeah, it was straight to school. I skipped kindergarten and year one, which was wonderful.
Yep.
Halfway through year two is when I started school. Started in Rose Bay Public.
Yep.
I was probably a novelty because I was the first sort of Russian-speaking person in school.
And could you speak any English at that point in time?
I could read, but I couldn't understand a word.
You could actually read and put it together?
I could read.
Yep.
I could read because I was taught to read, but I didn't understand what I was reading. Yeah. So I was, called a communist, which I thought, that's interesting. That's a bad word. But what does that word mean? Because, in year two, you go home, you go, Mum.
So kids actually said that in year two?
Yeah, they did. They did. I think it's because parents would have said, well, hey, she came from USSR, so she must be a communist. Yep. And for me, it was like, I know it's a bad thing, but how do you know? At 7 years of age, what in God's name's a communist? So I started crying, and then my mum went, oh, don't even worry about it. It's fine. Just, if somebody says something to you, ignore them. Just ignore them.
Yep.
So I did.
So did that happen quite a lot at school?
Not too much.
Or was it just when you started?
When I started. But then there was a few other kids that came from overseas that joined. So, yeah, safety in numbers.
Yeah. Fair enough. And so then what was it like for you then? Well, I guess being able to read would be a huge advantage, but it's just, then picking up the vocabulary and understanding what the words meant. Like
it didn't take long.
Yeah.
It didn't take long at all. I think I was pretty fluent within 6 months or so.
Yeah.
It was quite easy. I think when you're that young, you pick things up quite quickly. And I didn't have an accent either, which when I speak Russian now, I do have an accent.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I don't speak Ukrainian because I didn't get to school. Where in the USSR, they started Ukrainian at school.
Yeah, okay.
So I missed out on that.
How different are the languages between the Ukrainian and the Russian language?
Any Slavic languages, you get the gist of it.
Yeah.
But it's not, like you don't know exactly, but you get the gist of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I can't speak it to save my life, but...
And the characters, is the Cyrillic the same or the Cyrillic's different?
Yeah, no, it's the same.
So they actually use the same characters, but then the pronunciation's different?
Yeah, different words, different endings. I'm not sure about the grammar. I know the grammar in Russian grammar is incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. They conjugate everything. So I always found it difficult with my endings. And writing. Sometimes you have to find the core word to know which vowel you're putting in the middle of the word. Anyway, very difficult. I did it for my HSC.
Yep.
Rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but...
Look, you had a bit of an advantage, obviously, having grown up in that country, to have some base there. And I think it's always good. Like, me and Ange, we try our best to speak Chinese to our kids. Just from a cultural thing, I think it's nice, whether it's an advantage or not, I don't know. But like, I guess, they're learning two different forms of communication. And, I think there's something in language that you can't quite communicate from a cultural aspect without speaking the language.
Totally agree with you. I spoke to my daughter in Russian for the first 2 years of her life until she started daycare. Now, my ex-husband did not speak Russian, so it was really difficult. But when she started daycare, she just said, no, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah.
But she understands everything. And I think there is a development in the brain that really benefits from speaking a different language right from the get-go.
Yep.
And I said to her, you've got the benefit of speaking something. It'll be easier to pick up another language if you so chose. So, for example, her dad can speak Hebrew, French, Spanish, English.
Yep.
So I said, if you want to pick up French one day, you'll be able to pick it up a lot easier because that part of your brain is a little bit more developed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost similar to those European languages. Like there's a lot of commonality, even though the pronunciation might be different, but the words are fairly common across most of the European languages. And the same thing goes for Chinese. Whether you speak Chinese Mandarin or Chinese Cantonese, like there is some crossover.
Yeah.
But obviously, how you put it together or what are some of the more slang sort of words depends on the dialect that you're speaking. So I'm guessing it's probably fairly similar between Russian and Ukrainian from that perspective as well.
It is similar. But what's interesting is sometimes I want to say a saying in Russian.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult to translate. Like you can't.
Oh, really? So
really, difficult.
Yep.
Like, sometimes Audrey will stand in front of a television and I'll say to her this saying, but to translate it means, is your dad a glassmaker? Do you think you're transparent? Like, how do you translate that? Because in Russian it makes perfect sense. In English it's like, oh. So you just she understands it, but I've also had to say it to my partner and translate that. So he now knows if I say that, he goes, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
Get out of the way.
Get out of the way. It's your way of saying get out of the way.
Yeah.
And even like little superstitious things like Russians are like, don't put keys on the table, you'll lose money. Like, oh my God. So I had a friend and her dad, every time I'd come over, he'd go, get those keys off the table. Yeah. And go, why? What have I done wrong?
Yeah. And that's just a cultural thing.
It's just a cultural thing. Yeah. Like, go figure. Why keys on the table or shoes on the table was another one.
Yep.
You can't put them on the table. Okay.
Well, I think the shoes on the table is more like, this is where you eat. You don't want to put the dirt, right?
Oh, as in new shoes, I mean. Like,
shoes,
you can't even do that. Or whistle in the house, you'll blow all your money away or something like that. Oh, my God. There's so many.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same in a lot of cultures. Like my parents are very big on don't stand on books. Don't step on books, when you're a kid. Like, and,
I've never heard
obviously
that.
having kids and when there's books all over the floor, you sort of, by, circumstance, you end up stepping on books. But like, that was like a big no-no when I was growing up.
Maybe not to, step on the written word. Maybe it's something, I don't know. What's the background to that?
I guess it's, they sort of viewed it as disrespectful to knowledge, right? Like if you want to be smart, then you can't be disrespectful of books and knowledge and things like that. So,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's true. And books teach you so much, although kids these days, they just go on the internet, right?
I find the reading thing, even personally, like now I find it harder to spend long amounts of time reading. Like I remember when I was younger, especially in high school and that, like I used to love reading Terry Brooks. And so he's like a sci-fi author, and I used to read his books, and I could read them, at night time and basically read them until I was ready to go to sleep, kind of a thing. And sometimes even beyond, like if I was really into it, then I just keep reading. I'd be like, oh, I got to stop. I need to go to bed. But I find like, my attention span is very much wired to the modern age now. It's like,
it's also because you've got kids. I think there's a big difference. Something shifts when you start having children, and your focus changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to read Stephen King.
Yep.
Every book under the sun with my, blanket up to my nose.
Yep.
Terrifying, but I'd still read it. I thought it was great.
Yep. Yeah. So, and it's like, I remember my parents would tell me off for lying in bed and reading because I wouldn't be under direct light. Like, the light would be on in the room, but I'd be like this, looking up to the ceiling reading, and they'd be like, oh, don't do that. You're going to damage your eyes.
I was told off in year 12. My mum used to confiscate my books because I didn't want to study. I wanted to read.
Yep. Hey, it's a good, I think it's a good pursuit to have.
Yeah.
But I feel like now, like my attention span isn't there to really, and maybe it's the style of books that I'm reading. Like certain books, like I reread Dune, the Frank Herbert
series. My God, that's intense.
Yeah, like I reread that probably last year, and I went through 6 volumes in like less than a month. Like every waking moment was reading, and then it was just really odd. Because it'd be like I'd be doing things, and then I was that into it that I'd have the phone open because I was reading an ebook, and I was looking at the phone and doing something with the kids and reading the book, and then it'd be like I'd put my daughter to sleep and then read some more pages, and then everything I would do I'd like find a way to squeeze in a few pages. But aside from that, like I don't really think there's too many books that have like grabbed me in such a way.
Harry Potter.
No, I never really got into Harry Potter. Did you? You got into it?
I had to because I treated so many kids.
Yep.
And they're all talking about Harry Potter, and I thought, oh God, I've got to read Harry Potter because I don't know what they're talking about. So I got into it. And I actually thought the first probably 3 books were really good.
Yep.
The 4th one started going a bit dark.
Okay.
The first 3, they had a bit of a comedy factor in it as well. And some of the words and the spells meant something. So if you've spoken another language, you can actually decipher it a little bit. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay.
And then the movies came out, and I thought, Hermione doesn't look like Hermione.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like that.
Yep.
How I pictured Hermione
change
and
the way
Ron. It wasn't really what I thought they should look like. But then again, you got used to it.
Yeah. I think that happens with a lot of movie and TV adaptations. Like when you're growing up, you have this, and when you're reading, it's up to your own imagination to try and build who these people are. And then obviously when it goes into production and people have to do castings and all this sort of stuff, and they're going, oh, well, this is the person that we're going to run with. It may not actually link up with how a lot of people viewed.
No, that's right. Well, and everyone views them in a different way because everyone's imagination's different, right? So my imagination was completely different. But it was an enjoyable read.
Experience.
It really was, even though it was like a kid's book, so to speak.
Okay.
But then I could speak about it to anyone and everyone, so it was really good.
Fair enough. All right. So as a kid in primary school, like how would you describe yourself? Were you a studious kid or?
I was pretty studious. I was really introverted.
Okay.
Incredibly introverted. Never wanted to answer questions, never put my hand up. Just wanted to kind of disappear. Don't know why. I just didn't feel... I became more extroverted in high school, a lot more. I think maybe I was just trying to adapt to the Australian way of life. Yeah, it was different. And I can't say the kids were bad kids. They weren't. They were great kids. Everyone made me feel quite welcome on the most part. I think that was my journey, being an introvert.
Yep. So then moving into high school, then what do you think changed? Was it like you started to gain a bit more confidence with your language? Or?
I think I was a lot more confident. Oh God, what else changed? Boys. I think boys changed. So then when you start getting all this attention, you sort of go, oh, maybe I'm not so bad. Plus, I just like to talk to people. So I discovered the fact that I really like people. So I would talk to anyone and everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, so became more extroverted in that point. I still didn't put my hand up in class, couldn't be bothered. But I didn't have to. I was in Sydney Girls. Everybody would answer everything and fight for half a mark. And, you know, it was they'd kill for half a mark in that school. So I just sat back and went, yeah, I'm good the way I am.
It's an interesting culture though, like at a school like that, because it's sort of, even if you're not hugely academic, but you're in an environment like that, it sort of spurs you along anyway.
You become academic. Yeah. You actually do. You don't have a choice. I mean, I ended up doing 4-unit maths.
Yep.
That was probably my favourite subject of all time. I could have done that for, I don't know, hours and hours at a time. Did I do anything with it? No.
Yeah.
Which is really tragic. But, it was a good school. I have to say it was a school where everyone accepted everyone. Our year was incredibly accepting. So it didn't matter what you looked like. It didn't matter what you did. There was no bitchiness for a girls' school.
Yep.
Which I find, like, my daughter's in a co-ed school and that's not the case at all. And I don't know if it's different times or what it is, but, yeah, we had a lot of really good girls. And they've gone on to become amazing people and, yeah, great. I think one girl went to work for Microsoft, there's doctors galore, there's lawyers galore. You know, they've all done stuff with their lives and they seem to be quite happy.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of competition really. Like there's only two ways that people sort of respond to competition. They either start focusing on themselves or they start focusing on other people. And so, you know, the ones that focus on other people, that's when you get like those really sort of bitchy or like, you know, very, I guess I would say it's a poor culture. And I guess speaking from a workplace perspective, you know, in workplaces where people feel like they have to put other people down to try and get promoted, like I think everybody has probably experienced a workplace like that, or a place like that. But like that's something that happens in schools, you know, no matter where you go, it's just a different, you know, cross section depending on what the end goal is. But I think, you know, in good schools, because the only person that can get, you know, whether it's, I think when I did it was a UAI, now it's called an ATAR or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, that ATAR is really dependent on you. So there's no point. That's right. There's no point trying to tear somebody else down because they're not the one that's going to sit the exam for you.
That's right.
Right. So in a good school, like that's what I think is promoted. So everybody's then working on, well, how do you get the best mark for yourself?
Well, we were lucky also. We had some amazing teachers, and it's funny because one of the maths teacher that we had up until I think a year or two ago was teaching in Cranbrook.
Okay.
So I don't know how old he'd be. He'd be an old man by now. But he used to bring us donuts in the morning for our first, you know, morning lesson. We were doing volumes by slicing. Can't believe I remember this. And, you know, here you go, have a donut, work out the volume of the donut and you can eat it. And it's like, oh, what kid wouldn't go, oh, that's unreal. Yeah. Let's do that again. Yeah. Or he'd bring in, there was cakes. There was all sorts of things. Like he knew how to motivate his students, really knew how to motivate his students. But it was very common for him to come up with an answer to a problem and the entire class go, no, you're wrong. Yeah. And yet the entire class was right. It was a very interesting environment to be in. Okay. Very incredibly smart girls and yet quite well balanced too. Very well balanced.
Okay. So then, you know, thinking back on some of the teachers that you had over the years, what do you think, how would they have described Nat in high school?
Oh, it's funny because my old maths teacher still remembered me because I used to have patients and they'd go, oh, Mr. McLaughlin said to say hello to you. It's like, I don't know about him. My headmistress really liked me. So there were times where I knew a lot about what was going on in the world. So I used to watch the news and read papers, and she used to get me in there for, you know, let's discuss your report. So everyone would think I was getting into trouble because an hour later I'm still in her office and we're discussing not my report but what's going on in the world. So she really liked me. I really liked her, even though I got in trouble with her once, but
what did you do?
That's another story. I wanted to be cool and I brought some flour from my house and we had a flour fight on the bus and I got in trouble. So okay. I had to pay for the cleaning of the bus.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking about flowers as in like flowers with petals. No, You're thinking about cooking flour.
Cooking flour,
yeah.
Yes. I thought I'd be cool. Yeah, it just went pear-shaped. It was not a very good idea for someone who I wasn't naughty. I was always a really good kid. But it was like, oh, everyone else is doing silly stuff. Why shouldn't I? And I did it once, never did it again.
Fair enough. I was the opposite. I was always the kid getting in trouble.
Oh, really?
You know, and I think back to like kindy and I'm pretty sure it was kindy. And you used to have like those juice boxes,
Yes.
right? And so like the popper, you put the straw
The
in it.
Tetra Pak
Yeah,
ones.
Tetra Pak, right? And so what we used to do as kids is after we finished the juice, we'd blow them up and then we jump on them to make them pop.
Yep.
Right. Except I probably popped one that wasn't empty.
Oh no.
And the juice sprayed everywhere.
Oh no.
And, so I got into trouble quite a bit in primary school, and I remember, having to like face the wall and do all that sort of stuff. So
I remember when I was in primary school, they had the cane.
yeah, I didn't get that.
I remember they were caning boys on their
I got that from my
hand.
parents, but
Yeah. My mum, actually my parents didn't really hit me other than, when I played the piano. Yeah. Other than that, no. And it was only because they were wearing like their wedding rings were so thick. So when my mum whacked, she whacked with that ring.
and really, really painful.
It was not fun. Yeah.
Okay. So then when you were finishing high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to do after?
Yes.
You did?
I actually did. I was one of the few who did. So we had my friend and I, she knew she wanted to be a doctor. I knew I wanted to be a dentist. Initially I thought, I'll be a pathologist. And then I went, 13 years of study? No. I don't think I want to be doing that. That's a little bit too much for me.
Yep.
I'm almost done as it is. So I thought, I'll go to dentistry. I had a really good dentist. So he inspired me to become a dentist. Haven't regretted it, not once, I've got to say. 27 years later, I still think it's a great profession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I guess when you say he inspired you, what was it about dentistry that caught your eye?
I can't even say. I liked the fact that it was all clean, that it was scientific. I had a very scientific, curious mind, so I wanted to delve into things. So I think it was all about that.
Yep.
I love dealing with people. And maybe it was even partially the fact that I can speak as much as I want without anyone answering back. Maybe it was that. Although I've learned how to, decipher people when they've got a mouthful of stuff, so I know what they're saying.
Yep.
I wanted to do something medical, but I also didn't want to I didn't want to be a GP because I thought I can't be that script writer, let's do a Moxil or whatever it is. I just can't do that all day. I know they do a lot more, but at the time that's what I thought they did.
Yep.
So I wanted to have more variety in what I do from a day-to-day perspective. And then I went into orthodontics afterwards and worked for an orthodontist most of my life, so learned that. But it was that. It was just I wanted a variety in my life. I wanted to also have flexibility in my working hours.
Okay.
So I knew I wanted to have kids.
Yep.
I only ended up having one, but that's life. But I wanted that flexibility. So if I wanted to work 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, whatever it is.
Yep.
And that seemed to offer the flexibility as well. Yeah.
Okay. So then when you started your dentistry course, was there any points where you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was?
Oh, many points. We had a lot of people who were teaching us who I think were Neanderthals in Sydney University. They were part of the furniture. I think they lost touch with people.
Yep.
How to be with people. I think, when was it? It would have been 4th year dentistry in Westmead Dental Hospital when there was a particular lady who used to make boys cry. Like the men were crying.
Wow.
She was that mean.
How? What would she do?
She would make us redo things 20 times, 30 times, doesn't matter.
Yep.
You got to the point where you just didn't know what it is that she actually wanted.
Yep.
And the poor patients, because by that stage we were seeing patients for free because Westmead Dental Hospital was
it's a training.
It's a training hospital. So these poor people, oh my God, it's bad enough they'd have a filling for 3 hours because we didn't know what we were doing, let alone, redoing those gooey molds 30 times because we missed a tiny bit that in real life you don't even need. It was mean.
Yep.
It was mean, but I don't know. I don't know if she actually enjoyed that or she just was like that normally. We used to go to the pub afterwards just to forget our sorrows.
It's funny. I think a lot of times, when you're in a particular environment, you view people in a certain light, but then you pull them out of that environment and they're completely different people.
Quite possibly. I think I don't know if she was even happy being a teacher. She would have been in her 60s and she would have had enough of everyone.
Yeah.
After so many years of teaching, maybe everyone just annoyed her. God knows. But yeah, that wasn't fun. We had a lot of interesting stories. I remember I had to take out a tooth for a bikie. Guy was huge, had tats everywhere, and he started crying. And I went, I don't understand. You've got tattoos everywhere. I'd be crying if I had to have a tattoo. What are you crying? You can't feel anything. And he was so traumatized by a dentist that it was just that fact that it was the dentist and it was a needle that was different.
Yeah.
It was quite confronting. I just couldn't understand. But
yeah, well, it's one of those things. Everybody has a different pain threshold, or there's all like, if people have had a bad experience with a dentist as a kid, it really
traumatizes
haunts them, right?
Yeah, he was traumatized. He was genuinely traumatized. So it made you sort of go, well, don't worry, I'm not very scary. He was okay at the end.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, so for me, like there was a period where would have been probably sometime in uni where I stopped going to the dentist for a period of time, and it wasn't anything intentional. It was more like at the time I was poor, really. Like I was working as an apprentice, and I didn't have private health cover anymore because I wasn't using my parents or whatever, and I think could have been 5 or 10 years had gone by before I'd gone back to the dentist. And boy, was I in for a shock when I went back to the dentist with all the problems that I had. Yeah, it's like all the money that you supposedly had saved by not going to the dentist for all those years. Yeah, you just ended up forking back out.
And that's what happens. Not all the time. I've had people who haven't been for 20 years and nothing. They've got nothing wrong other than, gums and things that, you just have it clean. And then I've had other people that have come from overseas that had never, ever been to see a dentist, and they were in their 30s. And that was actually in Hurstville. I was here.
Yeah. And then, full of problems, right?
There were a lot in certain cases, depending on where they were from. So it is area related.
Okay.
Interestingly.
Why do you think that would be? Is it the diet, the food?
Diet. Maybe they don't know how to clean their teeth or floss or whatever it is. We had a few people from Tibet, which was interesting. Their teeth were not fantastic. And Nepal as well.
Yep.
That was also not fantastic.
Yep.
And, of course, anyone from the former USSR, none of their teeth were very good.
It's one of those things like, you get 2 sets of teeth, and, a lot of the times people don't learn how to look after them after the first set.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's good to encourage the children to look after them, because what are you going to do? You don't want implants, dentures. It's never the same.
Yeah. So I have to actually thank so my dentist at the time was a Dr. Michael Fong. I used to train martial arts with him as well. And so I had like a tooth that it needed a root canal. And at the time, like I was just pull it out, right? Like that's what I was like.
Bad idea.
And he was like, no. If we pull it out, then you're going to set yourself up for more problems in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I was just like, whatever, like, there's, I didn't have enough space in my mouth anyway as I was growing up. So that's why I've like got one crooked tooth on the bottom row. And so I was just like, just pull it out. It's not, and he's like, no, we should do this. And he told me the right things to do, and we did the root canal and the crown and all this sort of stuff. Because otherwise, like at some point I would have had to get an implant, which means that, you're getting a nail screwed into your jawbone or something like that. Oh,
you make it sound so terrible. It's not all that bad. But you don't want to be losing teeth.
Yep.
It just opens up a Pandora's box of problems.
Yep.
It really does. You're better off saving if you can.
Yep.
There are times you can't, but, you deal with that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of people that come in and say exactly that, can't afford it, rip it out.
Yep.
And it just causes dramas later.
Yeah. Well, so like there's a hole there, and it's not like the hole fills in, right?
No, and the teeth either side lean into the hole, the tooth that's adjacent to the hole on top or the bottom, depending on where you've got the tooth out, starts erupting, because your teeth erupt your whole life, so they keep moving. They don't have a little friend on the bottom.
Okay.
Just keep erupting.
They just keep going through.
Yeah.
So then what? They'll eventually fall out, right?
Well, depends. Eventually they'll touch something, because everything leans into the space as well, so it just becomes really quite difficult to fix.
You make it sound horrible. I'm getting visualizations of there's that Simpsons episode where Lisa's got to get braces. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh yes, I have.
And then they're going through the and then you're going to look like this, and then like this, and then there's like a tooth coming out through a cheek and stuff.
Oh my God, yes. I remember there was a what's his name, the comedian. Oh my God, I've had a mental blank. The dark-haired guy. He's very, very funny, and he went to the dentist anyway, it doesn't matter, and he started moving his x-ray upside down back to front and drilling his own tooth. So he went from one side, this was meant to be a comedy skit, but it wasn't very funny, and you can see how this can happen. So the massive x-ray that's that big, it just, you look at it and you don't know how to look at it really. You don't, because it's a skeleton. So most, lay people have no idea. So he'd drill the top right, then he'd go, oh, no, let's flip it. Oh, no, it's the top left, or let's flip it upside down, bottom left, bottom right. You're going, I guess that could happen if you had a layperson trying to do a filling, but thankfully that never happens.
So when you then went into orthodontics, did you have to then study another course, or how does that happen?
I got a job with an orthodontist, so I wasn't an orthodontist. I was a dentist, so I learned all my orthodontics from him. And I did get in and I started doing orthodontics, but I had some health issues, so I had to quit, which was very sad. I should have technically gone back, but I think it was such a difficult course. At the time, it had one of the highest divorce rates out of any Sydney University courses, which was quite interesting. And the thesis that the professor gave me was quite intense. So ultimately I decided, you know what, I'm working for an orthodontic practice anyway. I really don't want to go back and do this and stay up till 3 hours, 3 in the morning and then get up at 6 and then go again. It just wasn't really making me happy. So I didn't finish it, which was very, very sad. But in hindsight, I would have. But hindsight's a great thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. So when you say you had some health issues, like can you elaborate on some of those?
Oh, it was just personal issues, things that just weren't going away, and I had to keep going to the hospital and keep going and getting blood tests, and I think I was a little bit traumatized by the whole thing, and facing doing a thesis. Like, I was meant to do a thesis, this was an orthodontic degree, on the effects of mobile phones on different tissues in the body, which I basically had no interest in.
Yep. Wait, don't you get to pick your own thesis?
You're meant to, yeah, but no.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I think they've got rid of theses since then, which is a really good idea because it was really quite traumatic.
Yep. Okay. So then when you had these personal health issues, did you start ever thinking, hey, maybe I should look into this for myself? And the reason why I say that is because, like, so for me, like, if I get a sprain or something like that, so I did a TAFE course on massage therapy to learn how to massage people and things like that. And I always find, maybe I'm just a real tight Asian guy who doesn't want to spend money, but or I actually just like to try and work out, what are the problems and how to rectify it myself. Well,
the problem was that the doctor didn't really know what was going on exactly. So I had like 2 little minor surgeries, and then they said, oh, we can just open you right up. And I went, no, I don't want that. So I started doing research, exactly that, which is what I've been doing my whole life since then, is I always research.
Yep.
Oh, I'm totally fine now, but yeah, it's interesting to realise that doctors are humans.
Yep.
That was my eye-opening moment where it's like, well, they're not gods.
Yeah.
They don't know everything.
Well, and this is the thing, like, especially if somebody's gone to medical school or dentistry school years ago, the technology's come so far. Like, a lot of things have changed.
It has. They're supposed to be doing courses to keep up to date. But all the CPD, exactly. But they're still not gods, because at the end of the day, there are certain things that come up that they may not necessarily know what is actually going on with you. And we look at them, we do in a lot of societies, they're very revered and they're put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And I also have a pet peeve about our universities, because they seem to be producing people who can rote learn but have difficulty problem solving.
Yep.
And I think that's the right brain that's not functioning as well as it should be.
Yep.
We've got our left brain that's working a lot, and we can memorize so many things and we can learn so many things. But problem solving is pretty much a right brain thing. It's the creativity.
Yeah.
So when they pick people to go into these medical fields and dental fields, I think they need to look at that as well quite carefully. We've had a lot of people that came in from dental fields, and every time they come in, I sort of sit there and go, how is it that they can't problem solve something really, really basic?
Yeah. I can speak to that, because I went to both, vocational education. So I went to TAFE and I went to university. And so I did engineering at university. And engineering university is, it's a lot of maths, it's physics, it's, being able to calculate, pressures and loads and all this sort of stuff, torque, depending on whether you're doing dynamics and thermodynamics and all that sort of stuff. And compared to what I did at TAFE, being an apprentice mechanic, I used to make fun of, my friends, because I'd be like, you guys are all here, we're all learning this stuff, but none of you guys know how to use a spanner, right?
Isn't it true? Like, it's funny, we were supposed to use drills, right? And we used drills, but it just, I don't know why we didn't know exactly what we were doing. And until you start working, but that's in any profession, until you start working, you don't really know what the profession's really truly like.
Yeah.
But it's not even the work. I think they just don't know how to create. And you will never have a day where people come in and you don't have to problem solve.
Yeah.
There'll always be somebody where you go, scratch your head and go, this is interesting.
Yeah.
How do I approach this?
That's right.
What do I do?
Yeah. And you have to start thinking, what is the best way to attack this problem? And then it comes down to experience as well, because if you've never seen that problem before, it's very difficult to then put those two conditions together. And I'll give you a really good example, because at one of the events, I had one of the members came up and he was having a bit of a conversation with me, and he said, when he was younger, he had I think it was Kawasaki's disease, and at the time, he'd gone through all these hospitals and all these doctors, and he was basically dying, and nobody could work out what was wrong until there was this one doctor that saw him in passing, and just said, "This guy's got Kawasaki's disease. This is what we need to do." And like basically just took over and said, this guy's going to die if you don't do all this and this, and he needs this many vials of all this stuff. And it was just, for this particular guy, it was a bit of luck that, he'd gone across a doctor who actually had experienced it before and knew the signs and what it was, to be able to put two and two together. Whereas for everybody who hadn't experienced that problem before, they were looking at other things. They were trying to relate it to other things that they probably experienced in the past.
That's right.
And so that's one of the problems when we deal with medical things, is that it comes down to exposure. How many of these cases have you dealt with, and across what sort of breadth? Like, say as an example, I've sprained my ankles, multiple times. So I typically know, if I sprain my ankle, what do I need to work on? Which ligaments, which tendons in my ankle to try and massage and work on to get the mobility back into my ankles. But then it's like, now if I go and sprain my shoulder, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same thing. I now need to understand the anatomy of the shoulder better. I need to know, what are my rotator cuffs and all this sort of stuff to go and work out, okay, how do I now rectify that? And how can I do it myself if I don't have somebody, working on it from behind or underneath? You
just hit the nail on the head. It's the desire to learn. And that's a really big thing, the desire to expand, as my old headmistress used to say, our intellectual horizons. So when you've got doctors who really want to learn and want to experiment and want to treat the individual, they're the doctors you really have to put on a pedestal, because they're rare. They're out there, and there are, I shouldn't say rare, there are a lot of doctors who do that. They look at you as a whole, as opposed to, okay, you've got something like your shoulder's hurting, but why is your shoulder hurting, or why have you sprained your shoulder? Is there something going on with the rest of your alignment? Or, that's the thing, looking at a body as a whole, looking at it as an individual as a whole, and investigating what's going on. I know quite a few doctors like that, and I think they're very special people. They care about people. Yep. And sometimes some doctors have lost that, which is very, very sad.
I think that's I was having a chat with one of my other friends, and he's a doctor, a specialist as well. And he was talking about, by the time you come out of medical school, and if you go into specialise, like it could be 10, it could be 15 years of schooling, right? So by that stage, you get a bit jaded, because you've got all these other friends who have probably been working, if you do a commerce degree, it's 3 years. You do a law degree, it's 3 years. You do comm law together, it's maybe 5 years or whatever. You come out of that, and then you go into corporate and you start working, and then, in a few years' time, you're making pretty good money. And you've got almost like a 10-year head start on where a lot of these medical practitioners, or these medical specialists, where they're starting when they come out.
Well, that's exactly right. And then when you think, people say, oh God, they charge so much, but you say, well, look at what they've done. Like they've been studying for so many years. Don't they deserve it? I think they actually do deserve it. So, if you've got a doctor who's an amazing doctor, I'm happy to pay them. They've studied hard to be that amazing doctor.
That's right.
I don't begrudge them that at all. You've got so many people doing 3-year courses, and you're right. 10 years, 13 years, 15 years, depending on what they are. I mean, these days, oral surgeons have to do a medical degree, a dental degree, and then become an oral surgeon. Like that is, maxillofacial surgeon, I should say. There's a slight difference.
Okay. But and some of them, would come out of that process jaded, right? Like you come out of 15 years and you'd be like, I don't want to do any more study ever again.
I don't blame them, would you? I mean, you've done your 13 years of school, including kindergarten, and then you've gone and done 15 years of university. You're well into your 30s. Where did the money come from for all this study too?
Exactly.
And then especially because university study became paid study, whereas prior to that it was all for free. You're up with a huge HECS debt.
Yeah.
that you got to pay off.
Absolutely. So I was like that when I finished uni. I was like, I never want to go back to uni again or do any study ever again. And, it was quite funny because, a few years into my career, then I realized, I'm going to actually have to learn some more things, and do my own self-study. Like I didn't really want to go back and do courses, but I was happy to go and invest the time into things that I enjoyed and that I wanted to find out more. So, whether it was like reading books on leadership and all this sort of stuff and starting to understand a bit more from a psychological perspective, I always found that you've only really got two sort of trigger points. It's either pain or pleasure, right? You got to do something because it hurts you so much that you have to do something about it. And, I guess speaking on that, so my mum has had issues in the past with her mental health. And so I had to go, I did a lot of research into that. And so then, when my mum had to go back into hospital, I would be asking the doctors, hey, have you looked into this? Have you looked into that? And obviously they look at me and they're like, what are you talking about? Who are you? Why are you qualified to talk to me about this? Like,
how lucky is your mum that you did that?
Well, it's still it's a very challenging thing because I think there's a lot of stigma about mental health for parents like ours. Like I think, if you were to say to your mum, hey mum, I think you need to go get some help for this particular issue or something like that, they would hit the roof, right? Like they'd be there's nothing wrong with me.
That's right. We've been through that. We've been down that pathway where I said something to my mum. She went through something with my dad and I said, maybe you should see a counsellor. I am not going to be divulging all my personal information to some strange person. And the funny thing is, had she done it, she might have been in a better mental state. Yep. But, it's very hard to teach that older generation that's come from overseas where the glass is always half empty to be different. Yeah,
it's pride.
Yeah.
There's a pride element to it and then there's a stigma. And I think, this is why a lot of the undiagnosed issues or mental health issues in the country, in our country, stem from because you can't see it, right? But then, at what point do you have to then recognise it? Do you only recognise it when people commit suicide? Like that happened to a friend of mine, and part of the reason why I started the podcast a few years ago. It's coming up to 3 years since he passed away.
Well, it's tragic. Right? It's absolutely tragic. I was trying to find the suicide numbers on teens over this lockdown period because I thought, for them to be locked down and not see each other has been quite depressing, especially teenagers who need to socialise. Yeah. They really, really need to socialise.
These are your really formative years, right?
That's right. So, there's a lot of mental health out there. I know that when I wanted to get my daughter in to see psychologists because there was a bit of bullying going on, there was a wait list. I think at the moment there's someone else that's trying to get their child in 4 months. That's massive.
Wow.
That's massive for a kid that's going through trauma or whatever it is.
Yeah. Is that because there's an overwhelming amount of people that want to see psychologists, or is there an undersupply of?
I think there's a twofold issue here. So yes, there is an overwhelming amount of people who require mental health assessments. The lockdowns have not been very good with that at all. I mean, there's a study that it did come out, and it said that it really caused a lot of damage to people's mental health, to businesses and all sorts of things. Yep. The other issue that there is there's a lot of psychologists who see people face to face who have stepped down because they were mandated to have a vaccination and they didn't want to. So there is a lack of psychologists. So we need more psychologists because our teens are suffering.
Playing devil's advocate, one of the things that I often think about is, do we overdiagnose things though nowadays?
Potentially.
Because when we were young, it's just like my teachers would tell my mum, hey, do you give this guy red cordial because he's hyperactive all day, every day, full of energy? But that's just how I was, right? And my son is exactly the same like that. And so I'm sort of expecting, at some point the teachers to come knocking and saying, hey, he's your son.
They don't talk about red cordial anymore. Yeah. But what they do, I think it's cool to have something as well, which I've noticed with my daughter. She'll come home and she'll go, maybe I should be on Ritalin. And you're like, why? Why would you want to be on Ritalin? Is there a particular reason why you want to be on Ritalin? Who wants to be on Ritalin? But it was almost cool because all these people are on Ritalin and it's like, okay.
I can probably shed some insight into that because when I was in probably year 11 or 12, I wanted to get on Ritalin too because, I thought it's going to help me to be hyper-focused and I'd study better. So, from that perspective, I think it's that we as humans always look for the silver bullet. We're looking for an easy
Don't we
way.
just?
Yeah, we look for the easy way to try and get the outcome that we want.
Oh, I took her to a Chinese acupuncturist who gave her some Chinese herbal medicine instead.
Yep.
And she said it's the most disgusting thing she's ever had, but she's very happy to take it because apparently it's working.
Okay.
So forget Ritalin
Yep.
because there was no reason
herbs.
for it.
Yep.
It was just herbs. And I don't care if it tastes, nasty. I'm not that caring mother. Take it anyway. It makes it better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think, I see this a lot, like people always looking for the easy out. And it's so attractive. Like, I talk about this all the time when I have like guys who are into fitness and nutrition and stuff like that. It's something that I always bring up, that people always want to get onto what is the latest diet trend or this or that, and they think that that's actually going to help them, when the real answers are in the basics.
Well, they don't know the basics. That's the problem. They don't want, and they don't want the basics because that's hard work.
Yeah.
I think we've created a society that wants an easy fix for everything. You've got the kids coming in and it's like you get I know this is nice and everything that you get a medal for coming last, but sometimes when you apply for a job, if you come last, you don't get the job.
Yeah.
So are we preparing our kids for failure? Or, they need to know how to fail and accept the fact that they do.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, at some point in time in our lives, we're all going to fail at something. And that's completely normal. That you can't be a successful person and never, ever, ever have anything happen to you that's negative. So like if my daughter used to come second or third or last in a dance competition, it's like, well, pick yourself up. No big deal. Get up. Do better next time if you want to do better next time. But you know that if you want to do better, you've got to work harder. That's just life. This is what life is. So I don't know. Maybe I'm completely incorrect on that point.
No, I'm laughing because Ange is always like, because I'm a pretty intense person, and so I'm always like, second is the first loser.
That's what my parents used to tell me. Oh my God, second is the first last. I know. I used to hear that all the time. I don't say that to my daughter, but I do say, you've got to toughen up because life is tough. Yeah. It's not a picnic all the time, but if you deal with things that are negative or come your way that are not pleasant, then you won't fall apart.
Yeah.
And
that's where the growth is, right? So the growth is actually not in failing. The growth is being able to look at your failure and actually learn from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like if you fail and if you fail and you just don't, you want to put it in the back of your mind as a box and say, oh yeah, okay, we're never going to talk about that again. Then you're actually never going to improve from it.
Well, you're never going to grow. And that's the whole point in life, is growing and evolving. And things that tend to happen to you in multitudes of times until you actually, life bangs you over the head that many times until you take note and go, okay, well, I've learnt my lesson. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And, you've got to learn your lesson the first time. I think it's a lot smarter to do it the first time than continually doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, you move into orthodontics.
Yep.
And did you prefer orthodontic work over dental work?
I did.
Yep.
I did. So I basically ended up doing mostly orthodontics, and I've been doing that ever since. I really like it because you get the smiley people, they really like what you do, and you're not causing them pain per se. And you're not, they don't look at you as the evil person. They look at you as almost their savior for their smile. And plus I met a lot of beautiful people through it. A lot of really amazing teenagers, really amazing adults. There was great conversations because they could actually speak to you as opposed to not.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a really good career. I can't say I loved it. I still love it.
And has orthodontic technology advanced very similarly to dental technology? So why I say that is because I know my brother had braces when he was young. Is braces still the norm, or is it all Invisalign and that style of thing?
It's changing. I think Invisalign's becoming a lot more popular. It's cleaner, you don't see food stuck in people's teeth.
Yep.
A lot of the teenagers, their brushing's pretty suboptimal, particularly teenage boys who become allergic to water, soap, toothpaste and all sorts of things. And you see that quite frequently. With the aligners, it tends to be a little bit cleaner, although they do have to clean their aligners as well. The technology's come far. It really has. Even over my 27 years of working, even with braces, it's really progressed quite a bit. I don't know. People love Invisalign at the moment more so because no one can see it.
Yep. And is it faster or slower than braces?
Pretty much the same.
Oh, it's the same.
It depends who's doing it, you know. It depends if someone knows what they're doing.
Yep. Is there a limit to how far, like, I guess, does that mean, like, you know, if somebody knows what they're doing, they can sort of push the teeth a little bit harder, or?
It's not pushing teeth harder. You just have a longer treatment time. You just have to know your mechanics. So it's all about mechanics. So anything to do with engineering, it's funny, my dad's a mechanical engineer. He said, never go into, you know, mechanical engineering. What am I doing? Mechanical engineering of teeth,
yeah.
you know, same thing. No difference.
Yeah.
It's just a slightly different concept to braces. But mechanics are mechanics. So if you know your mechanics,
Yep.
you're pretty good.
So there was an interesting thing that I heard in a podcast, and they were talking about when it comes to kids and when their teeth, when they get their baby teeth and their jaws and their structure is forming, that a lot of the problems that we have in terms of alignment of teeth and things like that stem from how kids eat a lot of mushy food, like they don't really eat anything tough anymore. Do you think there's any merit to that? And the reason why I ask that is because I have beef jerky sitting up there.
Oh my God.
That's what I give to my kids. They love it. Like, because then
great.
they chew on it and they pull, and I think there's something to strengthening up the jaw, right?
I think there's a multifactorial thing going on here because we've got genetics playing a big role. So you might have a parent who's got smaller jaws, bigger teeth, or the other parent's got bigger teeth and they don't quite fit in. I think genetics play a massive role in it. Maybe mushy food, I don't know. I think the mushy food and the fact that we're eating a lot of processed food, how that's showing up is through the evolution of less teeth. So less teeth. So people are more frequently presenting with missing teeth.
Wow.
Which is really fun.
So when they're missing, how many are they missing? 1 or 4?
Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. It just depends. There are syndromes where you can have 20 missing teeth.
Wow.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that can occur. But 1 or 2 usually you can get a missing top front, sort of the second from the front.
Okay.
That's quite common. Don't think the girls like that much because it kind of is not very balanced.
Yeah.
The other ones are bottom premolars, and wisdom teeth can be missing, all sorts of things. But that could be processed food. We don't need the teeth anymore, really, if we're eating McDonald's every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all soft, right?
Soft and, complete rubbish.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your, I guess, departure from orthodontics and dentistry.
Yeah.
So, so I guess talk me through, say, the last sort of year of what that looked like.
Well, the last year, a year ago, I should say, almost a year ago, I was working actually in Hurstville, which was an orthodontic practice which I'd been at for 26 and a half years. And that was the area of concern. So there was a lockdown, 12-week lockdown. I was supposed to buy the practice, but from an economic perspective, it wasn't quite the way I envisaged it to be. So I decided, well, how do we know we're not going to have another 12-week lockdown? And, I'm in negatives before I even start. So I chose not to. And then when my boss actually sold the practice, he didn't even call me to say that he sold the practice. He got his daughter-in-law to call and say, oh, we don't need you anymore. We just had a difference of opinion and a few different things, and very unfortunately, because he was like my mentor and it was almost like my dad, really. So it is unfortunate, and I think he was getting dementia and it just wasn't quite the right place anyway for me to be. So I guess things happen for a reason, and when one door closes, another one opens, and it's usually how it works.
Yeah. So then when did you start getting involved with the COVID Medical Network?
I joined the Telegram group a long time ago just to see what they're up to, what are the, different articles that are going on, because I went through a period of, I think it was about 18 months where I'd read and read and read every article that I could possibly get my hands on. And they provided the most incredible articles from all over the world. So that was right at the beginning when they were formed.
Yep. So they started at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, they did. But I mean, it was more from a research perspective to see what is going on. What are we dealing with? What is this COVID-19? Where's it coming from? So it was interesting. And you sort of learn more and more from a medical perspective, and then you get into the point of, well, what's our government doing? Our freedoms are going. What's happening?
Yep.
And being from a former socialist country, that's what really perks your antenna up. And you think, wow, my parents got me out of a country where we had no freedoms, right? And now we're back in a country where we have not a lot of freedoms. You know, the borders are closed.
It's meted out to you, right? Like, and this is the sad thing. It's like, you know, you're not inherently free anymore. It's now freedom is a privilege.
That's right.
That privilege can be meted out to you as people see fit, you know, and there's people that can make the decisions and there's people that have to abide by the decisions.
I don't know if you saw Jordan Peterson speaking about that encroachment. If somebody wants to get, that was a really wonderful little clip where he said somebody comes closer to you by 2 millimeters and you get all uncomfortable and you'll step back, and then they'll sort of ease off and stand there for a little bit. Then they'll go a little bit further and a little bit further. Yep. Before you know it, you're a mile down the road and you don't know how in God's name you got there. Mm. And it kind of feels like that's what is happening in our society at the moment. Yeah.
What does your mum say about it? Like, does she sort of look at it and go...
Oh, no. My mum watches mainstream media 24/7. Yep. So she believes everything government says. She believes everything mainstream media says, which is interesting because she comes from a country where there was not an ounce of truth in the mainstream media. Mm. I mean, USSR used to tell everyone that the West was starving. Mm. We had no food. There were beggars in the street everywhere you went. Of course, that wasn't true. And she knew it. So I think she can't cope with not believing a government and not believing a news organisation anymore at her age. So she doesn't question anything at all. Yep. She stopped, that questioning has stopped for her. Yep. Which is very sad too.
Yeah. Look, you know, sometimes it's you almost feel like when things are really, really difficult, it's like, it'd almost be easier, like in the Matrix, you know, you take the blue pill and you just go back to living in this, you know, Matrix land, and, you know, rather than having the red pill and sort of, you know, thinking about the reality a bit more.
Isn't that the truth? Like, if ignorance is bliss, I mean, that saying has got to be one of the most truthful sayings. When you're ignorant and you don't know what's actually going on, it's much easier to live because you don't, and particularly I think when you do have children and you sit there and you think, well, what am I giving them as a future? Yeah. And do I sit back and just allow it all to happen, or do you fight for what we had? Like, I had a very free life. I could travel. I could do whatever. I'm really grateful for all that Australia's given me. Yeah. You know, it's been an incredible journey, which is why this is so confronting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like circle of influence, circle of concern. You know, you can only influence a certain amount, but if your concern is, you know, out here, when I say out here, you've got a larger area in your circle of concern, all that, you know, space between what you can influence and what the concern is becomes anxiety and worry and all these other negative emotions, right? And so I you know, speaking to that, that's part of the reason why, you know, I got involved with the United Australia Party. You know, people who listen to this podcast would already know, you know, I lost my job in the automotive industry for the same thing, you know, standing up for the rights of myself and some of the other workers, and unfortunately, you know, my company made a particular decision that I didn't agree with, and so, you know, the thank you to me was for standing up was, you know, we no longer need your services.
Well, we've got that in common. So I had the same thing. So I basically stood up for the rights of people there and myself, and obviously that didn't go down very well, but you know, you've got to, I look at it as I actually feel sorry for the people who have bought what is going on hook, line and sinker, because when you do come from a different government and you can see things, you can kind of judge for yourself what to do, and you can also judge for your kids. And I think the important thing is the next generation. Yep. If we can't protect our children, we have a problem. Yep. We have a genuine problem in this country. So if we can see what's going on, we can protect our kids.
Yeah. Well, the line isn't really like it's not really a left-leaning, right-leaning style of a line now. It's more like a vertical line where you got to think about, you know, are you in favour of autocracy or are you in favour of liberty, right? So they're more the values that people need to sort of be thinking about. And the reason why I always talk about this now is because, you know, for me, for the last however many elections, I never really cared, you know, deeply in terms of what are the election issues and what's going on. You know, it's only since having kids that you start to question your choices a little bit more, because now you realise that, hey, whatever you decide here could impact the future of your children, you know, and what they're going to experience in their lifetime, right? Like, so at some point, you know, when we get older and it's not really going to impact us anymore, because we get to the end of our lives and we go, okay, well, what are we making these decisions for? You know, who are we choosing these things for? And that's where a lot of, you know, the movements come out of, like whether it's people that want to focus on climate change or all these sorts of things. It comes out of good intentions, right?
Well, yeah, there's always good intentions, but sometimes they go by the wayside. And I I think also we need to look at the fact that there's cancel culture. If you have an alternative opinion, we cancel those people.
That's right.
Now, innovation is not cancelling somebody. Yeah. Innovation is the ability to argue different points of view and coming up with something that is different.
Yep.
The same thing with science, the same thing with medicine, and we've lost that. Yeah. We really, really have. You know, so if I don't like you, I'm just going to pretend you're not there and cancel you and block you, which is what our social media platforms are doing to so many different people. Unfortunately, this really destroys society because we are no longer free thinkers.
You can't have discourse.
Yeah, and that's a real problem. Yeah. That's a real problem. We need to get back to the fact that, yes, we don't have to be mean to anybody. Yep. We don't have to abuse anybody, but we can debate, and debate is healthy. Yeah. It is an absolutely healthy debate, whether we're Labor, Liberal, left, right, whether we're, you know, whatever colour we are, whatever race we are, we're entitled to have an opinion that we can talk about. And we're entitled to have solutions and come up with the solutions together as a whole instead of being angry at one another.
Yeah. And look, I think if you can have the conversation, you know, privately in your own home, you should be able to have it online.
Absolutely.
Right? There's no difference between you having that conversation privately in your own home or having it online. At the end of the day, yes, you can probably reach a different audience, but at the same time, I credit a lot of podcasts and things that I listen to with having changed my life, you know. And why I say that is because you can now listen to a conversation without being involved in the conversation. So from that perspective, you've got nothing to lose. You know, it's only up to you to decide what you believe and what you actually think. And after hearing both sides, you have a bit more of an informed opinion over which side do you actually align with more. And it's not to say you pick this side over that side, because there's so much nuance in every issue that, yes, you can take a particular framing on any subject and say, oh, this is the right thing to do. But then if you ignore, you know, all these other factors and issues that go along with it, you've only got a really nuanced view in terms of what you're actually talking about.
That's right. So we need to actually listen to each other a lot more and be accepting of differences of opinions rather than just cancelling whatever it happens to be. I just find that that's quite sad at the moment, and I feel like the next generation coming up is going to miss out on that debate.
Yep. Do they still do debates in school? So does your daughter get to do debates?
She didn't do debates. She did public speaking. Yep. She never got into debates. They did have debating teams, but she didn't get into that. She's really good at public speaking. Yep. Which is great.
Yeah, I always you know, I did do debating when I was in primary school. I don't think we really did it in high school. But I do remember, you know, in primary school I was often on the debating team, and I'd be the anchor. I'd be third, you know, because I could think on my feet and try and, you know, listen to the other people's points and then try and attack those points and raise, you know, concerns. But the good thing about debate is that you might take a position that is actually against what you believe, right? And you now get to think about it from an alternative perspective.
There's an art to that.
Yeah.
There's an actual art to that. Right. And I think that's excellent because we don't do that enough. Yeah. We need to look at every single aspect of every single opinion. And if you can argue against what you believe in, you're a legend.
Yeah, well, it's in the context of obviously, you know, in primary school and things like that. It's like because they'd ask you, the statement would be like the ends justifies the means, right? And then you'd be a positive team and a negative team. So there's no real net outcome that's going to, you know, change the world as a result of this, right? It's more a thought exercise.
That was a good topic. We used to have television versus books.
Yep.
Like that was just, you know, what kind of a topic is that?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, that's
pretty boring.
Yeah. So yeah, like I always think about that one because, you know, and throughout, you know, even in life, right? Like there's been certain times where I've been like, you know, the ends justifies the means, and then at some other points it's like, oh well, you know what? No, it doesn't. You know, so, and this is where it's like all of these, every life philosophy has a positive and negative, and it depends on the circumstances that you apply it, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, if we think about, you know, do it as a thought experiment, you know, the ends justifies the means. Well, when it comes to war, maybe not, because how many lives are you going to lose to get to your end goal?
Well, right? there's no winners in war. Nobody wins a war.
Exactly.
There's no winners. You've got civilians that are, you know, dying.
It's funny. I was so I'm reading this book at the moment. It's by a man named Will Durant, and it was written in 1960s. And the book's called The Lessons of History. And so this guy was a historian. He had published like 10 different volumes of historical volumes of records and things like that. And he would go through and talk about different ideologies and what happened historically with some of those things. And so, he'd give examples of, economical examples, and then, what's the influence of economy and history, or the relationship between economy and history, morals and history, religion and history. So he's got all these different topics, and it's only a short book. But what I actually gleaned from that book is just how cyclical a lot of these things are, that we go through these periods of great growth as a civilization, and that's usually off the back of really great times. So most times where there have been great levels of innovation and creativity in the world is when there has been stability in society, so that people can use the creative side of their minds and artistic sides of their minds to then foster innovation and scientific growth, right? Followed by, perhaps we get too, creative, and then we get to this point where then there's like almost like a consolidation, this sort of decay of society, because, we sort of can't pull apart, the human nature aspect that, when push comes to shove.
Well, I think what you're saying is humanity hasn't really learned in a way, because when you think about what's going on even now, Russia-Ukraine conflict, none of us know what really is going on. I mean, to invade a country, you've got to be pretty crazy, but you look at the civilians in Ukraine who are really struggling. I know people have just literally ran out of that country, have gone to Poland, all around. But the Russian civilians are suffering too because of all the sanctions. Putin doesn't care.
Yep.
You're not torturing him. You're torturing the people.
People.
So there's no winners in this at all. And it's just tragic. I've got my first cousin's living in Moscow and getting access to money.
Can't get his money out.
No, can't get his money out, and the ruble's being totally devalued. He wants to get out. Nobody wants Russians. So it's hard in both. I mean, it's much harder being in Ukraine and seeing all that, absolutely, and the civilians are being just absolutely pummeled. But it's just difficult. These poor people, really and truly, no one's going to win this.
Yeah. See, that was actually one of the points in the book, is that as technology has increased and improved, and a lot of innovation is actually drawn off the back of, research and development into weapons or defense, military ideals. And what the point was that, in the past, before you had all this firepower, it got to a point where the wars weren't really fought in terms of, people like mass civilian casualties. It was more like a bit of a chest puffery exercise between aristocracy, right? But then as the technology is sort of developed, now large amounts of people die in war, but it's not the aristocrats that die. It's the everyday people.
That's right. It is the everyday people. And this is what we've lost track of as well. Like Putin's got nuclear power.
Yep.
Ukraine doesn't.
Yep.
But then America does. So where's this going?
Yep.
It's there's got to be some sort of a peace team put together and go in there and actually negotiate peace so that the people are safe rather than promoting the war. To me, I don't know. I wish that the civilians were safer than what they are at the moment. But, I'm not a strategist in war, so I don't know how this all works.
Yep.
Very, very scary for the people.
So I guess, for you now, since you've, left the orthodontic side of things, there's been a few things happen, and I want to talk to you about, the ADA, so Australian Dental Association. And part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because I just found it interesting that they've obviously taken an interest in things that you have elected to do, which don't have anything to do with the ADA, really.
Correct.
Yeah. So what's happened, and how did it come about?
I think because I had an article written about me in the Sydney Morning Herald, which I did not actually give an interview to, so it was all collated from somebody's head and, I don't know, traipsing through social media or something. We had a lot of people call the surgery and abuse the girls at the front desk, and my boss was quite upset about it.
Wow.
I think he may have rang the ADA to seek advice. And the ADA must have gone through my social media. Now, what they accused me of was anti-vaccine sentiment going against the code of ethics of the dental board. There is nothing on my social media anti-vaccine at all. The only thing that I was promoting on my actual social media was things like vitamin D, which I'm sorry, you should be promoting for anything.
Yep.
because it promotes your immunity. I had a few different videos from Professor Robin Cosgrove, who was talking about the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which is all from statistics. There was nothing in there that was anti-anything. I've always believed in freedom of choice and body autonomy. I actually think people should have the right to choose, particularly when something is provisionally approved. And I don't promote that to anybody and never have, not to patients. I haven't said anything. It's up to each individual to make a decision
Yep.
as long as it's well informed. For me, it's all about informed consent, and if they've got informed consent, that is exactly what they need, and they can make their own decisions to do what it is right for them.
So then what did the ADA do? They sent you a letter or something?
They sent me a letter, but the ADA is more a union, so I don't quite understand how a union can actually send you a letter and say, well, you know, we want a response within 7 days. It's like, no, well, that's not what unions do. That's what disciplinary bodies do.
Yep.
I am actually paying you a membership fee. This has nothing to do with you. Particularly, I haven't done anything wrong. They said that the United Australia Party is an anti-vax party. They sort of implied that it was an anti-vax sentiment, and that went against the dental code of ethics. Now, I don't know how anti-vax it is. It's pretty much pro-choice as far as I'm concerned, and that's the sentiment I've always put out there, is a pro-choice sentiment.
Yeah.
So Craig Kelly wrote back to them, and he was pretty upset about the whole thing for me. I didn't really reply. My reply would have been very simple. Please provide any information and details of what it is you're accusing me of, which is bugger all. There's nothing to say.
Yeah.
But Craig really protected me, and I appreciate that, because sometimes you see people fighting for you and you think, wow, you know, someone's got my back. That's really great.
Yeah.
I don't think the Australian Dental Association really took too kindly to his response. So
Okay. Did they respond to that or not?
They did. They said, look, this isn't what we were saying. And I don't know, it was just a very disjointed email.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that they were saying was basically, you said something on social media. It's like, well, you can't say you said something.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Well, you got to actually point to
point
the
out
actual
to what
link.
is that. Yeah, first of all. Second of all, I've got nothing to answer to you to.
Yeah.
You know, you're not my disciplinary body, and if that's what they want to go and do, let them. I haven't done anything or said anything. So it's just interesting, this attack culture that's evolved over this particular issue.
Yeah.
The attack culture is usually from APRA, not from your, you know, government, your union. But yeah, there's a lot of doctors who've had that happen to them through absolutely nothing. They have said absolutely nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's interesting what's going on.
Yeah. It's very challenging, and it's hard to navigate as well. Like, I feel like, you know, and look, you know, this podcast will probably be flagged for like misinformation or something, but we haven't really talked about anything that's I believe it's misinformation. I feel like it's just one of those things where we're having a discussion about things that have actually happened.
That's right.
So, you know, I always find it interesting, because I don't really know where the line is drawn on some of these things for other people. Like, for me, I always think that you should be able to speak your mind freely. You should be able to contest ideas, challenge ideas, and have discussions about it. But for some people, it's like it's so much easier just to not have the conversation. But it's like, there's no point complaining when you've arrived at a destination if you've never put any input into where you want to actually go.
That's right.
Right?
That's exactly right. And what I don't understand why the freedom of looking at alternative medicines and alternative treatments has been taken away. I'm sorry, but it does feel like it's going into a socialist kind of environment where it is very, very one-sided. And like I said, innovation is not one-sided.
Yeah.
Science is not one-sided. Medicine is not one-sided. It is debate.
Yeah.
It is people coming together and discussing what the current literature is, current studies, everything like that. And then you can actually come up with solutions.
The right solution is always a multimodal solution.
Absolutely.
Right? So like, you know, when I approach recovery as an example, when I'm, you know, treating myself for injuries and things like that, I don't just go and do one thing. Like, say as an example, I don't just go and do massage. I might actually have to go and do, you know, use ice, use heat, use different modes,
That's it.
maybe use some creams and all these different things to then try and get the right outcome.
That's right.
So I think, ultimately if we want to prevent the loss of life, then we attack it with more than one modality.
That's right. It's a multifactorial system
Yep.
of treatment. And it's also your body is different to my body, is different to a child's body. So if you look at everybody is exactly the same and have a baseline treatment of exactly the same things for every single individual, you're going to fail as a doctor.
Yeah. Well, it's like saying, it's like when, and I love this one because we always talk about diets when I talk about nutritionists and things like that. And it's like, a lot of the guys, they don't want to get involved in talking about, a vegan versus a plant-based versus a meat-based diet. Like at the end of the day, it's more about, okay, can you hit, your macros? And if you can hit your macros, you're going to get the end goal that you want. But how you get there is up to you. Some people feel horrible on a plant-based diet. Some people feel horrible on a meat-based diet. It really depends on your genetics and what your body can actually process and not process, right?
And that's precisely right. Everybody's so different. So to have a blanket policy of treatments, or it's crazy. It's crazy. Everyone's different. That's why I like the integrative medical specialists. I think they look at things very, very differently. They look at you as a whole. They do your blood works. They have a look at what's going on with you, all your different systems. And you're treated as an individual, which is the way medicine used to be. That used to be Chinese herbal medicine. You're looked at as an individual. Even I think Buddhists used to do that too, as an individual, rather than, everybody's going to be treated exactly the same way. Well, not everybody's the same. Yeah.
See, this is I like that analogy because a lot of the times when you bring up, say, Chinese medicine and things like that, people who say Western medicine proponents, they'll be like, oh, that's all bullshit and you can't believe any of that stuff. But the way I sort of look at it is that these are just different lenses for how you interpret the data, right? So if the person is a patient and you're trying to help them identify what is the issue and how do you help them with their malady or whatever, you need to have different lenses to then go, okay, if I look at it from this Western methodology, what would that tell me about their condition? If I look at it from the Eastern lens, what would that tell me about their condition? Because sometimes you find that there might be alignment in what's being said, there might not be. But the more ways that you can attack the problem, the better, right?
But wouldn't it be great if we had Western and Eastern medicines combined to try and create something that's a lot better?
Yeah, but I think that happens naturally. So when I say that, a lot of the things in herbalism and things like that, they have been distilled and turned into chemical compounds for use in drugs and treatments and things like that.
Oh, they have. Yeah. They have. But I think a combination modality is so much better. Like when you've got the naturals and the, drugs that Western medicine is using, you end up with a much better result. Yeah. I don't know, like looking at people overall and the health of a person individually seems to work so much better.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's almost like, going and taking vitamins without getting any blood work done.
Oh, that's also
because if you don't, but, it happens. Like a lot of guys are, who are into health and fitness, they'll go and take a cocktail of different vitamins. I got all these vitamins in my cupboard. But every time that I go and get checked out and I do a blood test, I say, can you check my levels because I want to make sure that everything's on point.
Well, that's important, like especially for something like vitamin D. And if you follow Professor Barodi, he's just like, you've got to get your vitamin D's over 100. Or I think he's now said even over 150. Wow. Because it really prevents you from getting infections. It really does. He's done a lot of research on it.
So, because that's interesting because when I saw my GP, the GP that did the test for me the other day, so she was saying that because I was like 105, and she was like, "Oh, you're too high. You need to get it back down to like 80 to 90.
Up to 150 is fine. I'm sorry. The GPs get all they get their nose out of joint when you get above 100. There is nothing wrong with that. If you're taking vitamin D, they do recommend you take it with vitamin K. And there's nothing wrong with taking vitamin D as long as you don't go way above 150.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, we got really into the weeds in that part of the conversation. Obviously, if people want to go into more depth, I'm sure, if you contact Nat or I, we can provide you with all the different studies and things like that. So, in the interest of not trying to put all the links and things like that here, but feel free to contact us and we can obviously, pass all the different research and things like we might have looked at, and happy to have the discussion. If people think otherwise, I'm also happy to have that discussion.
Absolutely. I am very happy for someone to come and have an alternate viewpoint and talk about it and debate it. I actually welcome that. I think that's a really good way of being. Yeah, you need that.
All right, let's switch gears a little and let's talk a little bit of the political side of things, because I laugh because you've got these two guys that sit on Einfeld Drive every day
Yes.
with the signboards and things
Yep.
like that, and they're
Yep.
really lovely guys too.
Yep, they're great guys. They are great guys. They're passionate beyond a joke. I am so lucky and privileged to have them. They want another 10 of themselves. They want to clone themselves, but it's just not going to happen.
Yep.
Nobody's them.
Yep.
They're very passionate about it. They're concerned about our country. They want us to have an amazing life. And one of them has said, look, if we are not successful, we don't win, I want to leave the country. I don't believe we're going to have the same as what we had.
Yep.
Anyway, they're trying really hard. They're
Yep.
really trying for me, for themselves, for everyone.
Yeah. Have you found, so I guess talking about, interactions with the public, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's been positive and negative.
Yes, there has definitely been positive and negative, predominantly positive, surprisingly so. I actually would have expected more negative.
Yep.
Depending on the people. I think the negativity came from some people saying things like, oh, we just don't like Clive Palmer, but then they don't know Clive Palmer. So my answer is always, well, you're not really voting for Clive Palmer. He's funding our party and, I'm happy to talk to you about him, but you're actually voting for me.
Yep.
You're giving me the voice
Yeah.
to represent you in a community.
At least you know where the funding's coming from.
Exactly.
You know,
Whereas
versus-
opposed to Liberal or Labor.
Yeah.
Well, Liberal, we've got the incumbent. So in Wentworth, the incumbent is Liberal.
Yep.
And all his advertising is coming for our hard-earned tax-paying dollars. And
Yeah.
Wentworth's the second highest tax-paying electorate in
Yeah.
Australia. So we're paying for that campaign. I'm paying for his campaign.
Yeah, it's funny. So when I usually tell this story, whenever I speak, and my mum was the last one in my family to know that, I entered politics, and she said to me, what are you doing? Just shut up and go make money. Typical Asian mum response. And then, she sent me a WhatsApp message and it was like, oh, why are you supporting Clive Palmer? He's crazy. And I WhatsApped her back and I said, Mum, have you met him? ?
Mm-hmm.
And then I could see, she's typing and she's like, no, but the media tells me. And
Well, isn't that funny?
And I was just like, Mum, I really hope, in like the 38 years that I've been alive, that you know me well enough so that, if whatever is published about me or whatever, you know who your son is, right?
But that's the thing. Like, I had a very good lesson with the media, with the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yep.
They publish things, but do they know you? No, they don't. They just publish
Well,
things.
they didn't even have a conversation with you.
No, I declined that conversation.
Yep.
As per the United Australia Party advice. And I'm glad I did, because I don't think they would have been my friends anyway. I don't think it would have mattered what I said. It would have been twisted. And, there's lots of examples of that particular thing going on in the media.
Yeah.
So do we know Clive Palmer? No. Do we know anybody that the media talks about? No, because there's always a spin on what it is they want to say. It doesn't mean that's the truth. So I just say that you just have to trust that I'm smart enough and person and that wants to represent you, and I have your best interest at heart, which I actually do.
Yeah.
And that I'm not a politician.
Yeah. Well, none of us are.
No.
It's always interesting though, but I feel, there is obviously a stigma that gets attached to certain, I guess, ideologies or values. Like people say, oh yeah, like as you said, the ADA said you're an anti-vax party. No, we're not an anti-vax party. We're an anti-mandate party.
That's right.
If you want to get vaccinated, that is your choice, right? And so, it's funny, my brother actually, I was messaging him last night when he came online and he said, oh, I'm actually wearing one of your party shirts and it drives his wife crazy.
Oh my God.
That's what he said. And I said, well, she should be voting for us too. Like at the end of the day.
That's it.
But yeah, it's always interesting. I just find it, it's one of those arenas where until you've actually set foot into it, you don't realize just how much stuff goes on. And maybe just because it's so centric to us because we're getting involved with it at the present moment, you really pay attention to it. But I have a feeling it's always been that way, right?
I'm sure it's always been like, I don't think we've had experience in it. I think for us, we still have a bit of humanity left, which, when you become a politician, I think there's something that just shifts there. They don't think of people as much as someone who happens to be from a different background.
Yeah.
I still like people. I like my country. I'd like to do something positive for it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing it. I guess I didn't want to be a couch critic.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Well, like I think that was the biggest step for me was, making that decision. So obviously when I lost my job, I was quite angry. But I realized very quickly that being angry doesn't actually change anything. You know, you're not going to get the outcome that you want just by being angry.
That's right.
And as I said, you know, I put myself in the shoes of the board of directors that let me go, and thought, you know, what kind of pressure must you guys be under, you know, to feel like you have to make this decision? You know, you're going over and above what the government has required because it wasn't mandated for our industry. And, you know, to have to go and make that decision, there's obviously something that's really weighing on your heart or weighing on your mind to make that decision. And so, like, when I started to think like that, I wasn't angry at them anymore, you know, and I don't bear them any ill will. Like, at the end of the day, they're doing what they think is right.
It's fear-based. Yeah. And it's sad for them as well, because they felt that, you know, some sort of, there was a threat and they had to do something. It's just, yeah, you're right. And there's no point coming from anger, because anger doesn't achieve anything. So you have to come from either you're willing to change what you have been dealt or your country's been dealt, and you want to be part of a solution, not part of the problem, which is, I guess, what a lot of the United Australia Party candidates are doing. They've literally put themselves out there, and they've put themselves in harm's way, because we'll be attacked at some point in time verbally, but it's worth it. It's worth to be able to make a difference of some sorts.
Yeah, like I always say, you know, even the people that may not agree with what we believe in and things like that, you know, one day I hope, you know, they can appreciate that at least we fought for them as well.
Absolutely.
You know? So I think that's a nice way to end this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless there's anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think it's been absolutely great.
All right, cool. So if people want to find you, if anyone in your electorate wants to, so Natalie's running for the electorate of Wentworth.
Of Wentworth. So my email's wentworth@unitedaustraliaparty.org.au. So they can contact me on there. And my Instagram page is Natalie_Dumer, Dumer. And then there's a Facebook page that's linked to it. And there's a website as well under my name. So they can contact me in very many ways.
Cool. All right. We'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks for having
Nat.
me.
Cool.